If the brake is all the way up and I'm just on my driveway, the car will roll. And the driveway is not that steep. Today I want to work on the emergency brake system because it's not holding the car. Basically the lever goes all the way up and it doesn't do really much at all. So it could just be an adjustment. I have a feeling there might be something else wrong. Plus I have some maintenance records on this car when I bought it, and there was some shop that said that there was something wrong internally with the e-brake. So I'm going to investigate and hopefully fix it today. There is a little hole here in the rotor that allows you to access the adjusters. But like I said, because this is a pretty new car to me, I think I'm just gonna pull the entire rotor off and look at what's inside. Could be contaminated, could be broken, could just be way out of adjustment, but we shall soon see. There are two Phillips head screws that hold the rotor on, and they can often be hard to get apart. So I'm using this impact driver just to be safe. Yeah, so luckily those weren't very tight. Sometimes those could be a bear to get out, so it helps to push and turn with the hammer. And that's what this guy does. It just pushes and turns at the same time. The caliper's held on with some 19mm bolts. So I am just going to, I have a really long wrench. And it's pretty easy to get those off, even though the access here is pretty tight. Now I can go for a ratcheting wrench or something. Before I pull the caliper off, I'm gonna break the hydraulic line connection here at the caliper, because this is a hard line and I just don't want to stress it when I bend the caliper out of the way. So I'm going to pull that off too. This line already has a bend in it, and that doesn't look great. This car also has an electric brake sensor, so it can warn you when the pads are running low. So I am going to disconnect that part so we can remove the caliper completely. Yeah, so that's a 2-pin connector. So now I think we can take the caliper off. So there's the caliper. Brake pad life is not much left at all. These need to be replaced. We'll do that too. Here's the inside of that rotor. And it does look like the brakes are making some contact because it's a little bit shiny. This is the mechanism here, and these look like they're hot and cracked. Let me show you. So this is the brake lining material, the friction material, and there's like a crack right here and right here. The thickness is really thin, so it looks like someone's been driving with the e-brake on, because this is probably why they're not working. So I'm gonna go look at my part stash. I think I have some good used brake shoes, so I'd like to just replace these all together. They don't look contaminated, but they do look worn out. This is the adjuster side, and it looks like it's got some travel left in it. So I probably could adjust them out even further, but if I have better shoes, I'm gonna replace the entire thing. Just clean this up too. So before I loosen the springs and stuff, I'm going to relieve some of the tension on the adjuster if I can. Looks like adjusting it towards the front of the car is actually tightening it, so I'm gonna go back the other way. So there's no more distance between that cylinder and this adjuster. That's a quarter turn thing there. That loosens up everything. We might just be able to shift it forward first. Everything's loosened up quite a bit, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and take this off here so I can just relax the whole assembly. This guy does have a cotter pin on here, which I'll just replace it. There's the cotter pin. And so there's this castle nut here and a pretty large washer. So we'll make sure we put that back the way it was. But now this mechanism is pretty loose. There's one spring. There's the other spring, kind of has that shape to it. I grabbed this piece out too, just to clean it. It's pretty rusty. So that is now everything stripped down. So these look a lot better to me than the ones I took off. These are used shoes, but I think they're gonna be okay. They have a lot more lining left, and I've heard some of the new parts available today are actually made wrong and they just don't work. Little super clean. This is just water, H2O, and then this is the all wheel cleaner. It actually does a good job on brake dust. The wheel cleaner is pretty good. So I'm just gonna let this soak for a second, and then we'll brush it a little bit too, but you know, we're not gonna go crazy cleaning this car, but we'll clean it up as best we can. And I do use a drip pan sometimes. You know, I'm recently refinished my floors, but I don't let it get in the way of the work that I like to do. So that's the level of clean I'm able to do today. This is a driver, and if you clean it too much, you actually, you know, can take paint off and protective coating off and stuff. So this is, like I said, just kind of toothbrush clean. Anything that doesn't come off with a toothbrush, I just leave it on there. Some of this original Cosmoline coating and some of that grease is kind of there to protect the aluminum. Okay, these parts are out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and they're cleaner, you know, but they're not perfect. The plating is, you know, basically end of life, but it still has, in my opinion, enough life to keep going. So I'm gonna put it back the way it was. All right, so that adjuster's in. Now I'm just gonna secure this lower side. These things I think are referred to as the spreaders, and there's one behind there and then there's one here on the front. So I'm gonna try to get the one that's behind there onto these cylinders. That's where they push up against. Basically it's a fork. It's centered onto that post. And so let's try to do the same thing on the bottom side. Okay, so it's on both now. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at with the camera, but it's going to be tricky. So there is a post, just like this one. There's a post on the back, and the fork is going around that post, and then on the bottom, it's the same. So now we need to put the outer one on without the inner one falling off. That's the hard part. Okay, so that hardware is off. Here's the spreader. It's pretty easy to get it on. Okay, well that wasn't actually too bad. And now we put the nut back on. And there's usually only a few threads here, so we push from the back, start it. So when this gets pushed in like that, it spreads those shoes. So the tension comes from inside the car, but the mechanism here looks correct. And I don't see any sort of binding or bad orientations of the springs or anything. Everything looks right. The only thing I haven't put in is that cotter pin, but I'm gonna wait and make sure I can get a good brake feel, because this is one of the adjustments that we can play with. There's actually three. There's this guy here. There's an adjustment on the end of the Bowden cable. And then there's the last adjustment, which is the one you're supposed to use, is the star adjuster here, through the center of the rotor. We can pre-adjust this open quite a bit because, these are used pads. I know it doesn't need to be at this end of the limit. I find it maybe just a little bit easier to use this wrench when there's no rotor on it. So we're going to give this probably, 4 or 5 turns open just to get it started. We'll try that for now. As long as we can get the rotor on, that's a good starting point. I've adjusted this nut pretty far down until it just starts to spread it open. So I'm just monitoring the resting point of these shoes onto this block. So if you tighten this down enough, it's the same as pulling the handle inside the car. So I want all the slop to be removed prior to pulling the handle. So that's how far I know to drive this down. So I've got it to where it's just opening up the shoes right now, and then I'll just back it off until it's got a little bit of free play. So it easily slips over the initial setting we have there. And I lined the rotor up so these screws will hold it in place for me too. So it spins freely right now. There's no dragging at all. So now we'll start to move that adjuster out and get it dialed in. And we're just going to keep doing that until the wheel will not move. Okay, I'm starting to hear some dragging, but it still moves. So we'll keep going. Okay, so now the brake is on. Now I can barely move it. So we know that's too tight. So we'll back it off a couple turns like it says in the manual. I finished the other side to the same level that this side is done. However, the other side was worse than this one. The brake shoes, the parking brake shoes on the other side were down to the bare metal, and it actually destroyed the rotor on the other side. So I had to replace both rotors. I actually had some used ones. I had them resurfaced. And then the other problem was the cable wasn't operating smoothly on the driver's side. So what could have happened is either someone forgot to release the parking brake, which happens, even though there's a big red warning light on the dashboard, or it's possible that the cable was like frozen shut and just wouldn't automatically release the brake shoes enough. So here's what I had to do. It's a little hard to film on that side because it's close to the wall, but I have some extra parts. This is the tube that goes through the trailing arm into the backing plate. And it's just a hollow tube, it's got a flare on the end. And then this is the cable that goes through there. And what happened is this clamped part of the cable end is a pretty tight fit in this tube. So it basically, the tube was corroded and this clamped part of the tube is corroded. They're both steel. And this tube was not really sliding that well on that. I had to basically pound it through. And I was able to fix the cable to where it operates well. I got it oiled up, and so you should be able to just, move this in and out pretty easily. It wasn't happening on the other side. So I freed it up, I got it all oiled. I got this tube to slip over like it's supposed to. And then it was also missing a washer. So this is the part that pushes against that little spreader. And there should be a washer on the inboard side and the outboard side. That side didn't have the washer on there. So I corrected what was wrong and I got the thing to move freely. I replaced both rotors. Basically, it's turned into a full brake job. I have some new pads that I'm gonna put on it. So now it's finally time to put the car down and to try to pull the handbrake and see how it feels. There's a little bit of dragging, I can hear it, but we're gonna have to test it and see how far up the lever goes. When you pull the lever up, it's gonna recenter the shoes and then it's gonna release into kind of a center, hopefully. Not that easy to climb in here when the post is in the way, but I'll get in here. Oh, that's much better. So before the handle was coming all the way up, and now it's doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks, and it's pretty firm at 5 clicks. I've removed this center console piece, or just loosened it enough to where I can access this handbrake assembly. And there are 2 inspection holes, which are a little hard to see. One is right there, and the other one is right there. As you move the brake, you can see it pulling on the cables. That's where the cables attach. So the driver's side, which is this one, is advancing faster or further than the passenger side. So there's a little bit of an imbalance there. I just tightened these 2 adjustment nuts here on the emergency brake cable. That's going to rebalance that pull point. You can either adjust it here or here. I did it on here. And now I got it adjusted perfectly even and balanced. The other test you can do is with the handle 2 clicks up. You can just measure the resistance to turning the rotor. So compare that with the other side. They should be roughly the same. So now that everything's balanced and even, the last thing to do on the e-brake system is just to tighten these lock nuts up. Double nut those so that doesn't change, and then put the cotter pin in that nut right there. This side's completely done. We got new, new pads. Everything has been checked. So this side's ready. I'm going to put the wheel on, get the other side done. I just have to wait for my helper to bleed the brakes, and then we'll be on the road again. This ended up being a complete brake job for the rear, but that's okay. That's what the car needed. It had some bad rotors, ended up resurfacing some original ones, got new pads, redid the complete emergency brake from kind of checking every element from the handle all the way down to the actual brake shoes in the inside of the rotors there. Found some problems, but got it working now. This is why you don't just follow the manuals sometimes. The manual just tells you how to adjust it, but it doesn't tell you how to, really troubleshoot and dig into these old cars, 40 years old now, almost 40 years old. So things need to really be carefully looked at. That's kind of what I do in these videos. It's not necessarily the extra mile, but it's basically just making it work. So thank you all for being here. Sorry this video was late, but it was Thanksgiving week, and I hope you guys all enjoyed your holiday time with your family. So see you next time. Cheers.